Welcome to Doctors at Work. My name's Matt Daniel, and this podcast is part of my mission to help doctors create successful and meaningful careers. Today's topic is portfolio careers, and I'm having a conversation with Elle Todd. She tells me about her journey from full-time medicine to pursuing a portfolio career, highlighting the importance of self-reflection and proactive exploration in determining one's career path. Our discussion covers various aspects of career transition, including the challenges of burnout, the benefits of a portfolio career, and the importance of aligning your values and interests with your profession. Some key questions to ask yourself is, what is it that you want, or where do you want to be in 10 years' time? Our conversation concludes with us emphasizing the need for thoughtful self-decision making, for self-awareness, and for self-care in the process. Welcome, Ellie. Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Hi, Matt. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me here on the podcast. So I describe myself as a portfolio career doctor. So I'm 30, so relatively early on in my career, but I do lots of different things for work. So I work part-time in A&E as a doctor. I've got a couple of my own businesses, which I work on with my brother. And then I also describe myself as a creator and a bit of a coach as well when it comes to helping other people navigate career doubts, overcome burnout, and overcome some of the challenges that I faced myself on my own journey, because I've realized that I'm probably not alone with my own experiences, and I felt very alone. So I now try and just support and mentor others through similar transitions.
That sounds brilliant, and I know there are lots and lots of doctors are interested in portfolio careers. Medicine is a great career, isn't it? But in many ways, sort of, it's very constrained and very limited, certainly early on. So lots and lots of people are interested in exploring other stuff, particularly the creative stuff. I mean, how did all of this happen? At what stage did you go from being a full-time doctor to adding all of these other things to your career?
So to be truthful, I applied for medicine at university with the aims of thinking, yes, I'll be a doctor, this will be the right career for me. But as you've already kind of alluded to, the more I started actually working within the NHS in the UK, my understanding of what that career would look like in the future was quite different to what I'd kind of expected going in and studying. And I think also as I kind of transitioned through my early 20s and my late teens through to my early 20s, a lot of my own values changed in terms of what I actually wanted and what kind of I felt like I needed myself from a career. So I'd already been at university thinking, is this or is this not the right career for me? Been a bit open-minded, thinking I'm gonna persist with this. I think it is from, what I've been told from others. It matches like kind of what I want from a career and what I think will suit me as an individual. But I was also kind of keeping my options open. I guess that's the risk averse kind of side to me. I was, exploring, okay, if perhaps I start my foundation training, are there other things that I might want to do? So I did actually start exploring other careers at university, things like management consultancy, doing other kind of career orientated stuff, like joining other societies, so I could get a better understanding of what, working life might be like in different industries, say. But all of that kind of just more reinforced my decision making at the time of, do you know what, I need to actually just give medicine a try. Let's, invest in this. I've already committed loads. There's a lot of sunk cost here. Let's give this the benefit of the doubt and start working as an F1 and F2 and go from there.
Yeah.
So that's what I did. I threw myself into my foundation training. And as I kind of expected, I did love it and I did really enjoy it. It's a steep learning curve, which suits my personality. And, you just kind of like run with those challenges and you embrace them. But then once that kind of steep learning curve had passed and you settle into the rhythm of things, I started to look around and go, is this actually what I want from a career? And I was looking at my peers, I was looking at my seniors, trying to envisage myself in their shoes, say in, 10, 20 years time. And I couldn't see myself in their shoes.
Yeah.
So I was already at that stage sitting thinking, oh, is this really now my future? And I was starting to get doubts at that stage. And like the doubts that I'd already had kind of at uni were just essentially growing. And so I then started to be a lot more proactive in the sense of what else can I do?
Yeah.
And I again started then like looking at other careers, and I kind of focused mostly on the management consultancy route. And I guess the reason for this was because I've always had a entrepreneurial side to me.
Mm.
When I was I basically started like academic tutoring at secondary school, helping those in the cohorts below me go through kind of entrance exams. I then started tutoring people with GCSEs, A levels, and this was stuff that I continued to do throughout university. I'd like toyed with like other business ideas with my brother that we'd never started, but we'd always have these kind of conversations of like, oh, maybe we could do this or this. So I had this entrepreneurial side to me, and I think the medic in me that's used to just following a ladder and kind of like getting a qualification and going from A to B thought maybe management consultancy would be a really good stepping stone for me to go from medicine and into like being in a position where I'm better prepared to start my own business.
Yeah.
So I think that's why I led on that as the thing I was exploring.
Yeah.
I started exploring that in my F1 and F2. And I applied in my last year of med school, did various interviews. It's quite a rigorous process. And the overachieving Ellie went for just applying for the top 3 consultancy firms, BCG, McKinsey and Bain, and got some interviews, which were amazing. It was a great experience, but didn't get any offers. So I then kind of went through that process again in F1 and just with the top 3 consultancy firms, and got a bit further in, but got very similar feedback of, oh, we just try again, like not,
Yeah.
And I looked at that and I reflected on that, and I was starting my F2, and I was then, everyone's talking about what they're going to do next, what training program they're going to start. And I was just like, oh, I don't know. I don't feel ready to choose a training post. I don't have that kind of attraction to a specialty. And I was sitting thinking, crikey, I've just been like rejected 2 years on a trot for management consultancy at the kind of companies that I can see myself working at. Maybe I need to open my horizons a bit more and apply to others. And then I was kind of like, well, are they the only options? And I, in my decision making framework, I was like, what's the problem here? The problem is I'm not quite aligning with this career in medicine. So let's look at alternatives. What are those options? I'd kind of just gone for the 2, either stay in medicine or leave.
Yeah.
And actually, now what I say to others is that there isn't just 2 options. And if you find yourself faced with just 2 options when you're coming to a decision making, you need to go, okay, well, there is a third. Could you, and the third option could literally be, can you combine those 2 options?
Yeah.
And I guess that's kind of what I ended up doing.
Yeah.
And I kind of just realized as I was doing my F2 and like early on into my F2, I don't need a job in management consultancy to start a business. I can crack on and do that now. Like I've got more than enough skills. I'm a problem solver. I'm a communicator. I can learn and research better than, lots of like the average person based on what we do as doctors. So why can't I just give this a go?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of where I then found myself of, right, I'm going to start a business. I'm going to do something for my own.
Yeah.
And it was then a case of, well, what?
Yeah.
And I spent a lot of time going down the route of maybe I'll take the tutoring stuff that I did and make that a little bit more leverageable. So at that point in time, any tutoring that I'd ever done had always been one-on-one tutoring and offering one-on-one services. But again, that's just, kind of exchanging time for money. There isn't a huge way in which you can kind of expand that and grow that. And already I was noticing how like the amount I could do that was becoming limited by other things I wanted to do. So I was like, right, well, maybe I can take this into kind of like more of an online digital format. I toyed with that idea for a little bit and started kind of investigating that route. And then actually what happened is my brother and I came up with a different business idea, completely unrelated to medicine. And we decided to take the plunge with that. And it was literally as we were taking the plunge with that COVID started and the pandemic came down. And I guess it was a case of things just fell into place. It was kind of like the timing was just right for us, in the sense that my brother was furloughed from his job. So he was then working from home, but not working, was being paid to do nothing, and was obviously stuck at home. So he then started working heavily on this business and kind of drawing up wireframes, trying to figure out user journeys, how the business would work and what it would do. I was still then obviously working full time in F2, would come home and help him and work on the business on my days off or at weekends or outside my shifts. And then it came to the end of F2 and I was like, well, let me see if I can carry on working part-time. I'll go on bank and work as a locum. I knew other people that had kind of done that as F2s. They were doing it. I'd never locumed as an F2 or as an F1. I'd never I'd never felt the need to take on more work,
Yeah.
but I knew my peers were doing it. So I was like, right, well, I can do that too. That's a process. I can sign up to bank and do that. And so that's what I just started doing. And I stayed working in the A&E department. I'd spent 8 months in during my F2 because we'd all been frozen on rotations. And I then just carried on working with the team there on bank. And I then just continued to then spend more time working on the business with my brother. And ultimately, that's just now what I've continued to do for the last, well, so I stopped working. I finished my F2 in 2020.
Yeah, I mean that sounds amazing, and do you know? So I tell you, the thing that really stands out for me that has helped you make those decisions, and maybe where a lot of other people struggle. I think you very clearly, quite early on, articulated stuff around your values and your future. So that's question, do I see myself doing that in 10 years time? Because I think so often what happens to an awful lot of us, we step on a conveyor belt and then blinkers go on and then we just keep going, up the escalator, conveyor belt, whatever metaphor you want to use. We step
Yeah.
on, blinkers go on, sort of we don't pause, we don't think, we don't
No.
consider. We just keep going, and often we never pause and think, okay, what's at the end of this conveyor
Yeah.
belt? Do I actually want to be there?
Yeah.
And one of the things that you did, it sounds like quite early on, sort of, you didn't just step on the conveyor belt. You kind of sort of said, okay,
Yeah.
is this right for me? The next step, is this right for me? The next step, is this right for me? And also then that question of, do I see myself like Mr. Daniel in 10 years time, if I was your consultant or whatever, sort of, questions like that. And it sounds like that was a really powerful thing that says, actually, okay, consultants might have, or GPs might have very different careers to an F1 and an F2, but even allowing for that, you very early identified that it just didn't sit right with you. And that kind of strikes me as a really key thing that you did quite early on that probably helped a lot of what you've achieved.
Yeah. And I think it is listening to that kind of, and people talk about like gut feelings and whether you feel like completely comfortable with something. And I think I just always had that deep down of like, oh, I don't know if this is quite right for me. And I don't know if that's because I've been, like I said, a very risk averse person and always wanting to make the right decision. Like I always want to make the right decision. And I don't think I'm alone with that mindset as a doctor. Like, we do want to, we're set out to fix problems and treat people, and we need the right answer. And when we don't get that, we don't like that. And I guess that's part of our evolutionary psychology as well as humans. We like to be right.
Yeah.
And I just had that little bit of doubt constantly in the back of my mind, and I couldn't let that go.
Yeah.
And for me, it was a question of, well, do I just park that and ignore that for the rest of my life? And if so, am I going to regret that? Or am I going to regret not trying?
Yeah. Yeah.
And for me, it was that second, it was that I might regret doing this, but will I regret more not trying? Definitely. And, it's those two questions that I always say to people. If you're like doubting or thinking about something, like, like, will you regret, will you regret it if things go wrong? Maybe.
Yeah.
Will you regret not trying? If that answer is definitely, then you need to just give it a go, because, you're probably going to spend the rest of your life wondering what if.
Yeah.
And I just didn't want to be in that situation. I didn't want to find myself in that situation.
Yeah.
And I think the second thing that I've done, which I know, I've still I still practice now. I still work regularly as a locum. So before, this year's been quite different. The locum market's changed considerably.
Yeah.
In 2020, I suppose really in 24, it started to maybe change a little bit in the end stages of 23. But before then, I was working very regularly, probably like 2 shifts a week on average. Staying very like clinical, up to date. Yes, I wasn't progressing through my career in the sense that I wasn't on a training program, but I was staying, on top of my clinical skills and my knowledge. And so it was easy for me to get my appraisals done. It was easy for me to like stay with a member of the team and get that kind of like that paperworky side of things sorted. And as a result, I've gone through, my revalidation, and that's all been okay. So there's very much, for me, the way I've kind of navigated a transition out of full-time medicine, like I could still go back.
Yeah.
And I think this is the other thing when it comes to decision making. It's about the reversibility and the consequence of a decision. If the decision you're making is irreversible, and there's significant consequences, you need to spend a lot of time considering
Yeah.
your options, because if you make the wrong decision, there's
Mm.
no going back. But is there a way in which you can make that decision less irreversible? And that's what I was looking at. It was, okay, well, if this then does go wrong and I decide in, like, say 2 years or 3 years time that actually this road of trying to be an entrepreneur and set up my own thing isn't quite right for me and I don't quite like it, okay, I'll have lost time, and maybe I'm not be quite where I am in terms of my societal progress in relative to my peers, but actually, like, who's measuring that anyway, and why does that matter? But I can still go back, and that option is still there to fall back on. And I always describe medicine as kind of being like my parachute, and even now, like even more recently, I see it more than ever as my parachute, because being an entrepreneur and having your own career where you are in complete control of how you spend your time is hard.
Yeah.
You are your own boss. You have to, there's a lot of accountability that you owe to yourself, and sometimes you do feel quite lost, and there's some weeks where actually just stepping back into the hospital and getting back into that environment where I'm there to do a job, this is my role, it really helps me and my mindset, and just being back in part of that team. So I often describe medicine as being my parachute, and it comes back to what I said earlier, with our decision making. What are the options available to you? Is there a third option where you could do both? And I guess that is what, by definition, a portfolio career is. It's having, multiple forms of work, either on an employed or self-employed basis, that mean that, I guess, there's loads of benefits from my perspective. But yeah, we can probably talk about that.
I agree, and I guess I think for me with my portfolio career is that the stuff that I want to achieve in my life, and no one role would enable me to do all of it. Yeah, so for me a portfolio career means that I have multiple different ways that I'm
Yeah,
achieving and doing the kind of stuff that I want to
yeah,
achieve in life, that one single thing won't. I was laughing about sort of the idea of sort of being an entrepreneur, because I think a lot of people make away decisions. So you've made a towards career decision, yeah, as in you've identified what you want and you move towards it, yeah. But for a lot of people, if they're dissatisfied, if they burn out, they make away decisions. Yeah, they say, oh no, this is all too much, I'm going to walk away. Yeah, that's not what you've done. Yeah, so or maybe it's been an element of both, but you have very clearly had sort of
I've
had
had a piece of cheese that I'm chasing. Yeah,
yeah, but I mean the irony that which you also articulated, and I would completely agree that for me, my self-employed entrepreneurial side, I work way harder than I work in medicine, way harder, way longer hours. It occupies way more of my headspace, and it's not
yeah,
as well paid as medicine. so,
no.
so that's the kind of
Honestly,
yeah.
yeah, and this is honestly where I found myself, and this is where I've ended up falling a lot into the burnout
Yeah.
coaching and the burnout space, is because I think as medics, there's loads of medics that think the grass is greener on the other side.
Mm.
And I promise every single medic that I'm a walking, talking example that the grass is greener where you water it.
Yeah.
And I think, that burnout is often it's under discussed, and it is, I think, quite misunderstood. And lots of people forget that one of the signs and symptoms of burnout is that we do have disconnect with our job. Like, that is what happens when you start to move further on that stress performance curve. You start to get that disconnect. You start to, like, lose enjoyment in things that you used to find fulfilling and satisfying. You start to resent your work and your colleagues. And that is a symptom of burnout. That doesn't necessarily mean you need to change your job. It means that you need to kind of address the underlying stresses that are causing you to fall into that burnout side of the curve. And I found myself, I wasn't burnout wasn't the decision for me to, like, leave and move from medicine. But had it been, I'd be, upper what's the expression, upper creek without a paddle, because I've experienced burnout more working the way I do now than I did as a full-time doctor, like, hands down. And like I said to you, like, medicine's almost been my parachute in that sense, because it's forced me to pause of other forms of work that I'm doing. It's helped me find rhythm. It's helped, there's some mornings where, when you are burnt out, you almost kind of, like, lose that sense of purpose of, like, what am I doing? What am I meant to be working on? And having to get up to go to a shift kind of forces you to snap out of that. But yeah, I think I completely agree with you, Matt. Like, as then that's part of our personality trait as doctors. We
Yeah.
are high achievers. We want to deliver, we want to push ourselves. And so when we're working on stuff that's our own and we then have that kind
Yeah.
of accountability to ourselves, especially as an entrepreneur where, you're trying to progress, you feel like you always need to be productive. It's really hard. Yes, no, and that's kind of why I've ended up going and navigating that burnout space too, because it's something that I think lots of people think, oh, I can just find another career. I'm burnt out in medicine, I'll find another career. And I think as medics, actually, burnout will follow you.
Yeah.
A lot of your personality traits you're very susceptible to burning out, and it might not be the job that's the problem.
I hope you're enjoying the show. Please click subscribe so you'll be notified when new episodes become available. This podcast is part of my mission to help doctors create successful and meaningful careers. You can be part of that mission too by forwarding this show to one person who you think might benefit from listening. Thank you. Now on with the show. And that's the irony, isn't it? That
Yeah.
we might blame sort of the NHS and healthcare, and and NHS and healthcare, yes, it definitely has a role to play,
Yeah,
in terms
absolutely.
of, in
Yeah.
terms of that autonomy and teamwork.
Yeah,
I think the reality
absolutely.
is that if you go from NHS into another big organization, it's going to be just the same as NHS.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like you talked about management consulting, they'll be watching you like a hawk.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
sort of you might have autonomy as to what hours you work, but as long as you work 12 hours a day, you can work them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And and in medicine, sort of say, oh, I'll make a mistake and I'll get criticized. Well, sort of in the management consulting, you make a mistake, you're going to be out
You're
of a job.
fired. Yeah.
So the reality is that if you go from one big organization to another, it might be a little bit different, but overall there's going to be the same problem. And if you end up being sort of self-employed entrepreneur, what happens? You take that high achieving, driven, wanting to work as many hours as I can to achieve. You just take that from medicine into your own entrepreneurship, and next thing you know, you're working 16 hours a day, and every Saturday and every Sunday, often for not as much money as you would.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. No, absolutely. Yeah. You've just described my life.
But I like sort of, you talked about the third way, sort of, this idea that it's not I either leave medicine or I stay in medicine.
Yeah.
If people are sort of struggling with medicine, then and they want something that gives them more autonomy, then you can stay in medicine and have something that gives you
Yeah.
more autonomy. Yeah, or if medicine isn't enable you to do some of the creative stuff, then okay, you can do medicine and do something else that gives you creative.
Totally.
And then
And
medicine.
you pointed on a really nice analogy earlier, and I use a similar thing, and describing I was expecting one career to tick all my boxes, and I think like I was expecting too much, and I think anyone is expecting too much if they're expecting to find a career that does literally tick every single one of their requirements. And most people in, I say normal careers, normal's not the right word, but in like a typical career path, will come out of uni, they'll spend 2 years in a job, they'll understand what it is they did and didn't like about that job. They'll then go and take those things, hopefully, and go, okay, these are what I like, this is what I excelled at, let's find another job that focuses more on those things. And they then move and they then find another career and they spend a couple of years there, and they again reevaluate what skills do they enjoy, what are they better at, what are they not so good at, or what do they realize now actually they don't enjoy those things, and then again they make a move. And we don't really have that in medicine because there kind of is just this path that we have to follow. But you can still go through that process of going, okay, let's reevaluate here. What are my career values? Like, what is it I want? Do I want more fulfillment? Do I want more freedom of time? Do I want more freedom of location? Like, what is it I need? And like you said, you can then go part-time, and you can pick up or not necessarily even go part-time, pick up other things that kind of fill those gaps.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that I wasn't aware of. I certainly wasn't aware of as a medical student. Like, I hadn't even heard of like less than full-time training as a medical student. And I think it is more widely spoken about now. I even get medical students messaging me, talking about going less than full time already. And that's something I wasn't even aware of the acronym when I was at med school. But I think now it's become more widely aware that you can go less than full time in training posts. You can pick up like contractual roles that are less than full time, again, not on a training post, but you can still then be working as a doctor with that financial security and all the other perks of being in an employed role. And then like you said, fill those gaps with other things that you enjoy, whether that's still medical but maybe non-clinical. I found loads of people do end up finding more kind of formal teaching roles where it isn't them just giving up their time for teaching. They actually find a fixed kind of like teaching post or deliver that more formally, or they go more into like perhaps research. I know some people that work 4 days a week in a tech startup doing like sales and stuff, and 1 day a week in the hospital. Like, this is amazing. And that's what for that person, that's what they need to wake up each day and go, I'm excited to get up and go to work. Obviously not every day is going to be like that, but it's this whole balance thing, isn't it, of there's always, and I say this all the time, and I still reflect on it myself, because there aren't always weeks sometimes where I'm like, oh, am I enjoying this? But you've got to weigh up the pros and cons and go, how does that balance lie? And it's the same with any job. There's going to be negatives and positives to any role that we do, any situation we find ourselves in. But the minute the negatives start to outweigh the positives, then you need to start reevaluating and go, okay, what needs to change? And for me, on the whole, the positives now outweigh the negatives. Yeah.
I'm interested in where does grass being greener on the other side? Where the sort of, because we all do that, don't we? We'll say, oh, I wonder if I did that, what would my life would that's human nature. All of us are always thinking, what would it be like if I was doing something different? So where does that normal way of looking, oh, I wonder what it would be like on the other side, where does that get to a stage when you say, actually now I need to do something about it?
Great question. I think ultimately when you find yourself just really dissatisfied and really unhappy, and for me, it was, I was waking up and I was driving into work, like resenting going to work. I was like, I don't want to be here. I was excited going home from work because I was then working on things that I wanted to work on. And for me, that was like, oh, this isn't how I want to live my life. Like, something now needs to change, because I'm not happy working this way, and the course I'm on isn't leading me to the end goal. And I think this is what it always comes back to. We need to, as individuals, okay, the grass might be greener on the other side, and we think, oh, what if it's greener over there? What is it you actually want? So as an individual, you're sitting there thinking, oh, that it might be nicer over there. Why do you think it would be nicer over there? What is it that you would actually want for it to be nicer? Because I don't think we spend enough time thinking about that. And I know I hadn't really thought about that since before I applied for medicine. It was probably the last time I'd really thought, what do I want to do in the future? Like, what is it I'd want? It was probably when I was sat as a student going, okay, which degree am I going to apply for? So I think if anyone's kind of having those like, oh, what if moments, you need to sit and ask yourself, well, what is it you actually want? So what would you need for your grass to be greener? Like, what would your dream day look like? We all need to work on this planet. We all need purpose. Like, even people that don't need to work for money, they still need purpose. They still need a reason to get up and have that fulfillment in their lives. Like, that's what we do as humans. Like, we're problem solvers. We need that. That's like innate to us. So we all do still need to do some form of work. So if you had the dream day, like, what would your dream day look like working? And really think about that. Okay, so what do I need for that grass to be greener? And then try and go, okay, well, how do I get that? Because I think that's where I think as medics, and I see lots of people making this mistake of going, I need to get out of here. This isn't right for me. And they literally go, can you send me a list of alternative careers for doctors? Like, no, because that list is like huge. You could do anything basically. And you're then just going to pick from a list. You're not actually making a decision there. You're not consciously really properly choosing what it is you want. And you're just going to find yourself back at square one. So instead, you've got to go, okay, well, what do I need to change? What is it I actually want? And then kind of reevaluate, how can I get there? How can I achieve that? Because I think, it is all too easy to go, I just need to get out of here and I need to make a jump. And I'm lucky, I nearly did the same. I nearly fell straight into that trap. Had I been offered a management consultancy post, I'd have taken it, and I probably would have found myself, exactly as you described, like in the exact same boat. I'd have been working longer hours. Like, yes, my pay would have been much better. So that kind of that dial of money would have been compensating more for the lack of freedom of location and freedom of time. Would I have been as fulfilled? I don't know, but I would have been sitting there going, okay, well, it's fine because I'm making more. So it kind of like makes up for everything else. How long would I have done that for? I don't know. So I think, we really need to, we as doctors, there's lots of us that do get into these spaces where, like you described, we're on this conveyor belt, we feel kind of trapped, and I've now reflected, and there's loads of reasons I think why, we do feel trapped. We have this badge that's put in front of our name that starts consuming our identity. We have a system around us that is disempowering us and, forcing us to kind of just be picked and plonked wherever. And we literally become, it's almost a form of like chronic victim mindset, where we do just feel like we have to just go in the flow. Wherever the system says we go, we follow. And actually that isn't, we've got to just try and break free from that and remember that we are still in control. Even consultants that I speak to that sit, and I've had conversations with some consultants who are like, I'd love to start like doing more teaching and set up a teaching course that does like ultrasound teaching or focuses on this. It's like, well, you could.
Yeah.
And you don't need to take the risk of going, oh, well, I need to change job and then I've got my mortgage and I've got all these financial commitments. Like you can make your transition as risk-free as you want it to be.
And the good thing, Ellie, I think for me is that there's more and more of us that are not having standard traditional careers, and that means that it means that those of us that are doing it achieve greater fulfillment. Number one, number two, we're all model to the world around us that actually it's perfectly possible to do that, and it's perfectly possible to be happy, and it doesn't mean having to leave medicine, so which typically people think, oh, do I stay or do I leave? And as you said, it's not about leaving medicine, it's about crafting something that's right for you. And the other thing also that I think is really good is it means that our employers don't take us for granted, because sort of if our employers know that sort of that we're going to craft the kind of careers that are right for us, and typically what's right for us is also right for patients actually. So, that's the other ironic thing, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Often
Honestly,
for us is right for patients also. Yeah.
I honestly feel myself, I feel like I'm a better doctor since going part-time. I'm much more empathetic. I've got more patience and time. I don't mind running over at the end of a shift because, and I don't get that like panic in me where I then start rushing problem solving because I'm looking at that clock thinking, gosh, everything I'm now doing is just adding to my time, You don't have that kind of extra pressure. And I think, there's so many elements of that it does make me a better doctor in lots of aspects, it's a tricky one. But I think there is that option, like you said, it is a third option. It's a very viable option. And I think lots of us deep down, we've made such an investment to this profession. We don't want to let that go. And I don't know if that's, I sometimes sit and wonder, like, is this just me being really indecisive, like still holding on to this thing and like not being like confident enough to like make a clean break? But actually I then go, well, no, because I actually still really love science. I love practicing medicine. I love like talking to patients and helping them understand what's going on and their ailments. And especially as an A&E doctor, I'm just acutely problem solving, which for me is like, I love it. Someone comes and I'm like, okay, what's going on? Let's try and figure out this process. And so, and I still, I think it's different working as a locum in maybe like different specialities, but I feel in A&E I can still provide real significant value because I am just the same as anyone else there, if you know what I mean. Like it doesn't matter if I don't necessarily know what's been going on with the ward that day, because that's not how it works in A&E. So and it's just finding that way in which you can continue medicine if it is still obviously something you want to do. I know there's for lots of people, they suddenly get into the role and they realize this just isn't for me and it's not right, and that's fair enough. But I do think there are lots of others of us that realize that actually we've got more to give, and we want more for ourselves, and then that is achievable.
I wonder if I could bring us to a close, and maybe could you give me what would be your top tips, maybe your top 2 or 3 tips for doctors at work?
Gosh, So first of all, like, you need to look after yourself in order to look after your patients. And burnout is very much a workplace phenomena, but it doesn't mean that work is the only factor contributing. Like, as individuals ourselves, we contribute significantly from our lifestyle choices, the foods we eat, whether we have boundaries with ourselves and our work. And so I think it's really important to really reflect on other things that you can control yourself that are contributing to your stress levels, and do what you can to try and minimize those as much as possible. I find myself often falling into, I often describe it like the no trap, where you start just saying no to everything else that's not work because you just feel so exhausted, and actually this is this horrid negative cycle. So just, yeah, really be mindful that there will be things that you can control. I know it doesn't always feel like it, that can help minimize your stress. Secondly, like, please talk to other people. I think lots of doctors feel very alone and isolated with their doubts about their career. I know I did. And the moment I actually started talking to people about how I was feeling, and it might have even just been a conversation where someone was like, oh, well, you were thinking of applying for training. And I then actually went, you know what, I'm just really not sure. And they might go, oh, how come? And it helped them, me, to talk through it and help me understand my own reasoning by talking to others. Or that person might have gone, do you know what, I'm in the exact same boat. I don't know what to do. I'm thinking of doing X, Y, and Z. And then we help each other. And, you know, I think there is an element of like negative competitiveness within medicine. I don't know whether that's just come through from our studies, but actually we can talk to each other, we can help each other. And there's so much you can learn from other people by talking to them, even if that is related to doubts about your career. Like, you know, someone isn't going to go, okay, we need to fire her because she's having doubts. Like, that's not how it works in the NHS. Like, you're going to be okay for talking to other people about your doubts. So yeah, so please talk to other people. And then my third point would be, please remember that we are within a cohort of like amazing, high achieving, very capable individuals. And we sometimes then just compare ourselves to each other. And when we do that, we're taking like this section of society and then comparing ourselves within them. And I think that then makes us doubt what we are capable of outside of medicine. And it makes lots of us doubt, could I actually go into another industry or go into a different career or do something different, like start my own business or, you know, start a podcast up like yourself. Actually, you have got so many skills as a doctor and you are more than capable. And even if you're comparing yourself to your peers who are also very capable people, and you maybe don't feel as capable as them, you are still very capable. Please don't underestimate your own abilities. You've got like more than it takes to do other things. So yeah, they would be my three things.
Thank you very much, Ellie.
That's okay. Thank you so much for having me, Matt. It was a great conversation.